This week, Darktide began its pre-order beta, which effectively is an early access staggered release. The game officially launches in about a week and a half on November 30th, but anyone who pre-orders can start playing a limited version of Darktide immediately. Now, I want to start off by just saying I really like the core of this game. As I talked about in my coverage of last month's closed beta, so much is done well here, from its combat, the overall gameplay loop, the atmosphere, music, and just about everything about the setting. All of this is very well executed, and as a game, Darktide is just plain fun to play. But unfortunately, despite the base of the game being very solid, there have been a ton of issues with this early access release. It's gone so poorly, in fact, that the game currently sits at a mixed rating on Steam. So for what I consider to be such a good game, like, what is going on here? I would say that there are two main factors at play. For starters, the beta, as they're calling it, has just been a giant mess of server, performance, and technical issues. It's really not been good. There is a lot of the normal standard stuff that you might expect with a lot of people trying to all play at the same time. But let me just tell you personally, for me, it began with not even being able to connect to the game. When Darktide released on the 17th, I tried booting it up and was met with about a minute of attempting to join servers, followed by this back-end error, which told me it could not sign in. Now, because this was launch day, I just figured, hey, they're having issues. There's probably a lot of people trying to play, and there were. It was at about 70,000 concurrent players on that first day. So I attempted this for about 30 minutes. I kept getting the same error, and I decided, you know what, whatever, I will just wait until tomorrow. So come Friday morning, I make my cup of coffee. I'm excited to sit down and game all day with my pals. I boot up Darktide, and there it was. To my dismay, the back-end error was still here. And keep in mind, this was at like 8 a.m., so I figured at this point, there's no way they're still having server load issues. This is like the lowest point in the day when it comes to the number of people. So I head over to Reddit and I looked to see if anyone else was having this problem. A quick search revealed, yep, lots of people were in fact have been unable to connect to the servers. All right, so I go through all of these standard suggestions. I reset my router, I restart my PC, I verify the integrity of game files. None of that works, so I try reinstalling the game, and nope. So I go back to Reddit and then I read this one like crazy suggestion. Somebody says, hey, I turned on a VPN and it all of a sudden worked. I'm like, no, that's stupid. It doesn't even make sense. But I was desperate at this point. My friends were already playing and I really wanted to join them. So I caved. I purchased a VPN subscription, flipped it on, and immediately got into the game. Just mind blown. I completely... what is happening? Basically, I guess there's some sort of authentication issue going on, and I've been told outside of flipping on a VPN to circumvent this back-end error issue, you could also try changing your DNS. Either way, that's like a lot of hoop staff to jump through in order to even connect to the servers, and that is really just the start of the issues. I should mention as well, I checked just prior to recording this. We are 4 days now into the soft launch, and I still am unable to just boot up the game and play normally. I have to use a VPN to connect. I need to connect to a nearby state in order to even get past the login screen. Beyond whatever is happening here that is requiring a VPN or DNS change in order to even start playing, there have been a few other issues that I personally have run up against in my time with the game these past few days. Because yeah, to clarify, as soon as I connect with a VPN, I can from that point forward play normally. And how is that playing gone? Well, there have been some problems, some of this just typical server issues that you will get for online games when a lot of people are trying to play, coming across login queues and having to wait to join the server, dealing with the occasional disconnect, which then puts you in a login queue. And then also, in these past 4 days, the matchmaking system has been breaking every single day. We have run up at some point throughout the course of playing into just unable to start a match. Can't queue into a match with quick play. You can't start a match on your own. We try to start a match as a group. We try to start individually. Just nothing will work for a set window of time. Typically, this has been somewhere in like the 30 to 60 minute period where you just can't start a match. We can sit in the social hub, but we can't get into a game. And then when I am actually in and playing, I will say that I have had what I would consider unreliable performance. The frame rate will go up and down at times. It is not completely terrible for me. A lot of the times it is fairly smooth. I hover around 100 100 frames, but then occasionally we'll get some pretty big drops. So that's the stuff that I'm dealing with. I can't play without using a VPN. I've had just some of the typical server issues, hiccups, and inconsistencies, and my performance has been mostly okay, but at times not so great. There are two main widespread complaints that I see from a majority of the negative reviews and just general discussion about the game. The first one is incredibly poor performance. Like, that is the number one complaint that I see on every negative Steam review, is that the game runs very, very poorly, very low frame rate, lots of hitching and frame drops. Now, like I said, I've experienced what I would consider unreliable performance. A lot of the time it will run fine, but every so often in certain levels, my frame rate will tank, turns into a slideshow. Obviously, don't enjoy that. But apparently for many people, it is just bad all of the time, almost to the point where it feels unplayable. And another issue which makes the game pretty unplayable is constant crashing. This is another reportedly widespread problem that people are running into. In fact, one of the people in my friend group that we play all of our games together with, they are crashing all of the time. I would say just about every other match, they have had a hard crash to desktop and were forced to restart the game. Now, fortunately, they have a rejoin system, so a lot of times a bot will replace you and then you can jump back in. But there have also been a handful of times where they've hard crashed, booted out, replaced with a bot, and then even though they're getting back in roughly about a minute's time, they were replaced by another player in that process. So then one of my friends they didn't get anything. They played through most of the match with us, they hard crashed desktop, and they couldn't get back in before another player replaced them, and so they miss out on all of the experience about any potential weapons they may get from the Emperor's Gift at the end of the match. They don't get anything. They're just completely screwed basically because of that hard crash and because they were unable to rejoin because they were replaced. So yeah, very, very poor performance to the point of almost being unplayable, and constant crashing are two of the biggest complaints when it just comes to the technical side of things. Fat Shark, the developer, has come out in a post and talked about some of the other main issues that they've been running into and that they're trying to deal with. Players encountering these internal errors, players encountering the back-end errors, which that's what I had and couldn't play the game. GPU-related crashes, which seems to be one of the primary issues. Some players not receiving rewards or experience at the end of mission. That's not particularly great. And then other server and connectivity issues like failed handshaking and things like that. So there is a laundry list of problems. As you can see, this pre-launch beta test, it's like 10 days to launch. They're calling it a beta, but whatever. It's been a mess. These network issues, these bugs, these crashes, the horrendous performance for a lot of people. But this stuff isn't really the only issue. Another pain point does just seem to be the way they're rolling out the release. So as I mentioned at the top, they're starting with a limited version of the game. In fact, in its current state, this is more or less a slightly varied, improved version of the closed beta that we played last month. As of this recording, in the game, it currently consists of 4 missions spread across 4 zones, and they also have some new items, mechanics, and features compared to the prior closed test. There's the new configuration of levels to play, so we're getting some variety there. There's also more variables. These are things called conditions. You can get fog obstructing your vision or an increase to the number of enemy hordes. Playing a mission with these conditions will reward you some more experience, so it's a nice little boost. There are also new mission types. There is the investigation mission where you can follow the servitor and scan objects in the environment. Again, this just adds more variety to the experience. There's also these new mechanics like these curios items, which are just little items that you slot in for your character to grant you some stat buffs. There's also like new weapons, and there have been overhauls to the UI, and there's a list of some more minor things as well that they've added from last month's closed beta to the current edition. It's a lot of cool new things. There's new content to see and play, but also at the same time, it is limited. And that brings me to what I feel is the second issue currently dragging the game down when it comes to these mixed reviews, and that is just their decision to have this pre-order early access also be staggered content release, is how they're doing it. They've effectively launched a 2-week early access with a fraction of the content and just plan to slowly introduce it in the weeks to come. So what is classified as week 1, which is the 17th to the 20th, it's those 4 missions across 4 zones. Week 2 is from the 21st to the 27th. It will add 4 more missions, bringing the total up to 8 missions across 4 zones, in addition to new events and what they call other surprises. We do know that there are more vendors and stuff that need to come into the social hub. Maybe that's what they're talking about. Then week 3 is classified as November 28th to the 30th. This adds 2 more missions, bringing the total up to 10 missions across 4 zones. And then finally, November 30th is the full launch, at which point there will be 13 missions across 5 zones. zones. So we're getting one additional new zone, as well as some new conditions, those in-game events. So for anyone who pre-ordered, jumped in immediately on the 17th, and has played for these first few days, they're only having access to about a third, roughly, of the total content that will be in the game come launch on the 30th. And it does seem like this has, maybe unsurprisingly, left some people with a poor first impression. This is reflected by the reviews. As mentioned, they're currently sitting at a mixed rating, which does mean more than 30% are negative. And the biggest critique beyond the server and performance issues that we went over seems to be the game's lack of content, or just in general seeming like it isn't ready for launch. Now, the developer Fatshark has been clear in stating that they consider this pre-launch period a beta that is meant first and foremost for testing and feedback. They say, let's face it, launching a game is not easy. More often than not, day one issues will prevent many people from jumping right in. Like, I don't know, say not able to join servers unless you activate a VPN. And then they said, our pre-order beta aims to help optimize the launch experience. We plan on doing this by slowly ramping up our services over the next 2 weeks. And I totally get that idea in theory, like make it so that the server load is taken off and you can squash some issues. But the fact that we are 2 weeks from launch, and the fact that in order to find that, I had to go through their blog post, you know what I mean? I think what the issue here is that people who are just hearing about Darktide, excited about Darktide, and then hear it's playable on the 17th, and they're like, oh, sweet, let me pick it up. And they don't go through the process of reading the details of what is included in this playable early release. And they don't realize that it's a third of the game, more or less. They're gonna be left with a poor first impression, really. Whose fault is that? You know what I mean? Is that the person's fault for not researching what they're buying into, what version of the game, the fact that they're calling it a beta? Is that Fatshark's fault for releasing a early access period that is basically just a soft launch with the possibility of resetting content, by the way? I'll touch on that in a moment. It's really hard to pin down. I guess I just feel like it might be kind of a misstep to go this route. Not the idea of releasing a game in a pre-launch period in order to alleviate the server pressure and iron out any final bugs, but to do that with the limited content, I just feel, again, like it's just leaving a bad first impression for a lot of people. And it does feel like it is the case, really. We are paying money to play test the game and help them iron out bugs prior to release. All of that is kind of a long-winded way of saying, why isn't this just a beta test if they're still running into all of these issues? Why is this tied into pre-order and then also staggered content release? I really like Darktide, okay? I've said it up and down in my first video covering the closed beta. I think this is a great game, and I'm actually fairly convinced it's going to be a very, very solid experience when all is said and done. So much about the combat, the gameplay loop, the atmosphere, the world building, the music, all of that. It's just a really, really, it's good. It's fun. Like, I've had a good time even with this stripped down version of the game, just playing with my mates for these past few days. But I do think what they're doing is just acting as a poor introduction for a few reasons. I do suspect there will be some portion of players who jump in and play what's here and come away feeling like the game is lacking, because it is. In its current form, it is lacking just because they're releasing the content in a staggered manner. Again, whose fault is that? If you're buying into early access and then complaining that it's early access and doesn't have everything, that is on the player to the degree for not doing their due diligence. But at the same time, they're selling this game to people. People are spending money on the game, and for the sake of the game, I'm just not sure this was ultimately the best route to go. We have to remember, we are in a landscape where there are a ton of great games to play. Every day, new games are coming out, especially with the live service industry being what it is. A lot of these big games are super polished and continuously get more and more content and have these growing player bases, and first impressions for that reason, they matter a lot. And Darktide, currently sitting at a mixed user score on Steam, can attest to that fact. The first impression has not been good for the myriad of reasons we've went over. I know that they're calling it a beta, but yes, we are at the moment 10 days away from release, and by all accounts, the game is still plagued with issues, technical, performance, and server, and this does, I feel like, justifiably have me concerned where the game will be at in 10 days from now. I mean, that is on Fat Shark to fix. My advice for you at this point would be to just wait for the full release, to not buy into this early access for all just because it's got all these issues and not all of the content is there. Once all of the content is in the game on the 30th and we have time to see if they've ironed out everything that's currently a problem in these next 10 days, then I will tell you if all of that is good. Yeah, check out the game, because the core of it, I'll keep saying it, is really good. It's a lot of fun. It's a cool game, but they do have a lot of hurdles to clear. And I do want to mention as well, it's worth noting that I just found out recently, it's not even guaranteed that progress is going to carry over from what I've been playing for these past 4 days. It's not even guaranteed it's going to be there on the 30th. What they've said is that their goal is to ensure the progress carries over, but that they cannot fully guarantee it. The reason being that part of this beta test period is for them to test the progression systems, and they are reserving the opportunity to change or reset things in the event something unforeseen or critical happens, which is all the more reason to just not buy in right now. Not buy in, not because I don't think Darktide will be a great game if they solve all of these problems, but because there's just still too many issues. And that's where I am right now. I'm pumping the brakes. I'm just not going to play anymore until the full release happens in 10 days. I don't want to burn myself out. I don't want to have progress reset once I've already sunk almost 20 hours in. The fact that might just go away, possibly. I don't love it, but that's why I'm done. I'm putting the game now down. As much as I want to keep playing because it's fun to play, I'll wait till there's more variety of content, till the rest of the content is in there, and to see if they can fix all of these issues in the next couple of weeks. We will see. And hopefully by the time launch happens as well, I can log in without using a VPN, because I don't what is going on? All right, that does it for me today. It's been a bit of a mess, but I'm still very hopeful for Darktide. I hope they can fix these issues. And hey, you could argue that part of the reason they're doing things the way that they're doing, even though it might end up leaving a bad first impression for some users, was to deal with these issues, because it's, I guess, better that they're trying to deal with them now than on the 30th. I don't know. We'll see. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. I'll see you next time. Take it easy.